Good morning, everybody. This is Debbie at The Woman Behind the Smile, and today I am going to introduce you to our Stand Up and Speak Up series. Many of us have something we're hiding, something we're ashamed of, something that through no fault of our own or through our own making, something that we keep hidden, and that in turn keeps us hidden from each other and the world. Good people go through terrible situations. Wise people know when and how to let it go. Everything that happens to us helps us grow. And while it may be hard to see it right away, the most important thing to do is to change your perception about your circumstances. Stand Up and Speak Up features ordinary people who've been through extraordinary struggles and found the courage to step out from behind their smiles and speak up about their experiences and the lessons gleaned from those experiences. We are dedicated to encouraging you to remove the mask of embarrassment and shame and let it go. Everything that happens to us helps us grow. And while it may be hard to see it right away, the most important thing to do is to change your perception about your circumstances. Stand Up and Speak Up features ordinary people who've been through extraordinary struggles and found the courage to step out from behind their smiles and speak up about their experiences and the lessons gleaned from those experiences. We are dedicated to encouraging you to remove the mask of embarrassment and shame and to putting an end to victimization. Let's stand up and become the victor, not the victim. Okay. A little bit of,
static there.
Yeah. You got to call it. I should have done that. But let's be awesome, not angry, and let's acknowledge what happened and forgive ourselves first, and then move on in our power and with our power. So today, we've got a guest who's a friend of mine, and I've got to tell you that when I met her, I was a guest on the Dr. Oz show, and it was really interesting because I sat down with her, and I was looking at my associate producer, and I'm like, who's this woman? And she laughed. She said, that's Benita Alexander. And I said, well, I'm not sure I know who that is. So I Googled her, and wow, was I surprised at this woman that was sitting across the couch from me. So I would like to introduce my new friend and heartfelt companion in this experience here, Miss Benita Alexander. Are you there, my dear?
I am. Thanks so much for having me, Debbie.
I'm so excited you're here. Now, you have an extensive biography, and I have it up on our website. It's really long, but I would like to let people know that you are an award-winning producer, director, and writer. You've produced a variety of films and TV programs, and you're currently a senior VP for True Crimes Programming for Efron Films, which is based in New York and in Toronto. You're living in New York, and we just had a short discussion about being there and amongst this virus situation. I'm so glad you can be with me today, so welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here and so glad you're doing this.
Well, I found it, and you and I are soul sisters to the max here, where we've both been through situations, and I've realized that it's time to stand up and speak up and let people know that we're not alone. So,
absolutely.
Now, Benita, many of my listeners have not heard of your story, and I really do encourage them to go and Google you, which is tremendous about the Internet. But I would really like to hear your story from your voice, and what can you tell us about what happened to you?
Well, the short version of it is I fell in love with a man who I thought was Mr. Perfect. Absolutely swept me off my feet. I was floating on clouds. He did literally everything right. He was a world-renowned doctor and scientist. He spoke 6 languages. He was romantic. He was smart. He was worldly. He was charismatic. He was everything. He was fantastic with my daughter, who was then 9 years old at the time, and who really tragically, her father was dying of brain cancer at the time, and he sweeps in like Prince Charming and promises to take care of us both and, takes us on this whirlwind ride. He was incredibly generous. My friends loved him. My family loved him. I mean, there literally was nothing wrong, which probably should have been my first clue. And we were engaged to get married. We were together for 2 years, and 6 weeks before the wedding, I found out that he was literally lying about everything. The whole wedding was some sick, twisted fantasy. We were supposed to be getting married in Italy. We had 300 guests coming from all over the world. He was still married to his wife in Italy, who he had told me he was divorced from. So we never could have legally gotten married in the first place. Nothing about the wedding was real. Nothing was booked. It was all just a big fantasy, a big sham. And on top of it, I quit my job. I had been working, had a very successful network career, and I quit my job because we were moving to Barcelona, and I went on my own I hired a private investigator and then went on my own investigative trip. And in the house that I was supposed to be moving into with him and with my daughter after we got married, I found a whole other family and young children. Ultimately, it turned out he had, in addition to me and the wife that he supposedly had divorced, he had at least 2 other families, probably more. And the worst part is that although he is a real doctor, it turned out that he was also lying in the medical arena, and he was doing this very experimental procedure, and patients died because of it, because he lied about the work he was doing. So it's just tragedy on top of heartache and just a giant, unfortunate, ugly, devastating mess.
To go back to the beginning, though, I met my guy online, and I never did actually meet him in person online. You met him through your job, right?
I did, and this is one of the reasons that I would never suspect anything wrong. I mean, I was doing a story on him, actually, when I first met him, because the work that he was doing was so groundbreaking. He was literally the only person in the world that was doing this highly experimental, life-saving procedure. And look, he worked for the place that gives the Nobel Prize in Medicine, for goodness sakes. I met his colleagues. I saw him in the operating room. We followed him with cameras all over the world. I mean, there was no reason in the world to think that this man, of all people, would lie to me. However, that said, there were those little nagging things that I just, whatever you want to call them, red flags or whatever, that I just pushed down because I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. Why would a man of this caliber, and somebody so prestigious and literally world famous, why would he lie?
Can you give us one of the little, what I used to call them, pink flags, because I didn't want them to be red? What were those gut feelings you had?
Well, for one thing, he flew me all over the world. We took these extravagant vacations everywhere. He was always surprising me and these incredibly romantic trips and all these wonderful things, but I never went to the house in Barcelona. There was always a reason why I couldn't go, and conveniently, because he's a surgeon, there was always a last-minute emergency surgery. There was one time I was literally on my way to the airport, and oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And towards the end, we started arguing about that a lot, because I said, who the heck marries a man without seeing the place they're going to live, for goodness sake? It makes no sense. And I also had not met his children, who were about 18 and 19 at the time, I think. That one, I was, I've been through a divorce. I come from a divorced family. I know how difficult those things can be, so I was willing to let that one slide a little bit. I figured I'd meet them when they were ready. But it was like his world was somewhat shut off from me, and that's a huge sign. They sort of want to know everything about you and immerse themselves in your life and ask you all these questions and want all this information, but they're, sort of evasive about what's going on in their life and meeting people in their own lives. So that's a sign. Although I did meet his mother, and that's the weird part. I mean, he had me and my daughter in his house in Italy, and she cooked for us and everything, but she didn't speak English, so who knows what he told her. I was probably some patient of his that was dying, and maybe that's why she was hugging me and crying. I don't know.
Well, it was very public, though. I mean, you had pictures everywhere of the two of you. So a wife did come out and didn't see that. How did he keep that separate?
I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that are mystery. I mean, he was always videotaping, which I ended up making a film about it called "He Lied About Everything."
Mm-hmm. Excellent film.
And that was one of the crazy things. I mean, he was sort of, in a weird way, filming his own demise. I mean, I have so much video. He was always videotaping me and so many pictures, but, I had them here in the U.S. It's not like these were being, until after the fact, these were not being distributed on the Internet or anywhere where he was. So I guess it was easy to keep it secret.
True. And what did your friends say? Well, because at first when you were still working, it was kind of a strange thing, right? You had to be careful because he was part of the job.
Yeah, initially it was difficult. I mean, I fell madly in love with this man who I was at the beginning doing a story about, which for a journalist is a major conflict of interest. I mean, you're not supposed to cross that line for very good reasons. I mean, obviously things can be compromised, or your point of view, you don't get involved with somebody you're doing a story about. And it was really difficult. I agonized over it, and I pushed him away, and I said, I can't be with you. But I was so crazy about him, and he was so persistent that eventually I couldn't resist anymore. And all of my friends and family who met him, there's not a single one of them now who wouldn't tell you that they thought he was just head over heels in love with me, and they still cannot understand that. They all were enamored with him and enamored with us. I mean, people were jealous. People would tell me, you've renewed my faith in love, men and women. So, yeah, I mean, it certainly seemed real.
Why do you think basically he picked you out? I mean, you're a beautiful, intelligent, well-trained woman. What was it about you that he knew he could pull you in?
This is something that I tell women all the time, and I think this is very important because a lot of women that are taken by these con artists are incredibly intelligent, successful women, strong women. And one of the most difficult things about the whole thing is, you are left asking yourself, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have been so blind? And it's so painful, and it's so embarrassing, and it's so humiliating. But I think they almost get a rush out of it. I think they target people like us on purpose. It's a thrill for them. You have to remember, their minds are, whatever's wrong with them, sociopaths, psychopaths, whatever they are clinically, they don't think like we do. And there's I really think they get some sort of sick rush out of fooling us. It's kind of a challenge for them.
It's extraordinary how he built the story and kept it going.
Oh, it's insane. And I will never understand it. I've tried, but I think it's impossible.
Well, you've gone majorly public. I mean, you're international, and I Googled it. I went to YouTube and I saw videos and clips in multiple languages. So your story's out there, and a lot of it is because of who he was, and as an international surgeon who was disgraced by the Nobel Peace people. It's a huge story, but the fact is that women all over the world are being conned in person, and I think you and I talked about this, how I used to say, if you haven't seen him in 2 weeks, then he's a scammer. But now, you were with him for 2 years, and it turns out to be a scammer. So it can happen to anyone, and we both believe that if it happens to us, it can happen to anyone. But when you hear people, or when you're speaking and you hear people laughing in the background or snickering, how does that make you feel? And has that ever kept you from speaking up?
Look, it's difficult. I mean, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't. It's painful. When this first happened, and I think this is true for everybody, it doesn't matter. My story is on an extreme scale, with who he was and all the details, but it would have been so much easier for me to crawl under my bed and hide and run away from it and try to pretend it never happened and try to move on with my life. And it was very, very tempting to do that because it hurts. It's incredibly embarrassing and humiliating. In my case, I felt very strongly that I had an obligation to speak up because he's a doctor and he has people's lives in his hands. And when I embarked on my investigation, I didn't know the extent of what was going on in the medical arena. I only knew that if he was lying to me like that, then he had to be lying in an equivalent or worse way in the medical arena. And I felt a personal obligation to talk about it because I thought I might be the only person that was willing to expose him. That said, it's been a painful journey, and it continues to be painful. I mean, I lost friends. There are colleagues that don't talk to me anymore from, that I had worked with for many, many years. I've reading the comments online was horrendous. I mean, at the very beginning, when my story first went public, I had a couple of really, really bad days where I was just in tears all day long because I was reading some of the nonsense online, and my friends were joking that they were going to come over and, either throw my computer out the window or tie my hands behind my back so I couldn't get on the computer because it's difficult. But I think it's very important that we speak out, and it's important to try to rise above that. Anytime you go public, unfortunately, you're always going to have the naysayers. You're always going to have these stupid people that sit behind their computers, the anonymity of being behind the computer and being able to say whatever they want, and people are just mean, unfortunately. You have to have a bit of a tough skin, but the benefits of speaking up are so much more important. I mean, we need collectively to have a voice so that women know that they're not alone, and women know that they are by no means stupid. This is not on you at all. These men are predators. I always say they're really no different than a serial killer. They are calculating, they are manipulative, they target their prey, they look for women who are vulnerable in one way or another, they know who they can go after, and it's not your fault. It is absolutely 100% not your fault.
Well, I can feel you. It's funny. I just had this instant feeling that we are sisters by other misters, because when my story went out a couple of years ago, it went through the Palm Beach Post, and it was a written article, but they also had it online. And as soon as it hit online, my girlfriends called and said, do not read the comments.
Yeah. And
they actually called the reporter because there were things that weren't even about me, that they were just so vicious. And so the reporter said, Deb, here's the key. It's important for you to speak up, but do not read what other people are saying, because you're not speaking to them.
Right.
You need to be speaking to the woman that's been through it. And that's why I think, any of us that have been what I call survivors or thrivers, not victims, have this sisterhood amongst us, that we've been there, we feel it, and we're not alone.
Exactly.
And why do you think you're in a position to speak up? Your job was that kind, but what makes you the kind of person that would speak up in spite of this?
Well, I think in a way, as I tried to make sense out of it, I thought, okay, maybe there's a reason this happened to me, because I am a journalist. I mean, to start with, look, when we say this shouldn't have happened to us, we're smart, intelligent women, I'm an investigative journalist, for goodness sake. I'm almost like literally the last person on the planet this should have happened to, which made me think, okay, maybe there's a reason this happened, because I have the tools to expose him. I have the tools to go make a film about him and to really put some light on this. And that sort of helped me in a way. It gave me a mission, and not about revenge in any way, but just about awareness and education. And the more and I'm sure the same with you, the more I started talking and the more public my story became and the more women contacted me, I realized how many people are so afraid to speak up, and for very good reasons. I mean, there are lots of reasons in people's personal lives that they can't speak up, or their careers. But if we can, it's really important to do so, because if we don't speak up, this just perpetuates, and women are out there suffering, thinking that they're stupid and that they're the only ones this has happened to, and they're not. So for me, it just became a way to use my background and my career and turn it into something at least helpful out of this whole mess.
Well, and I really thank you for that. And I was just thinking that, in my case, my scammer, he ended up with the money. It was about money for him.
Yeah.
In your case, in the case of the men that are conning in person, sometimes it's not about the money. Like your guy, he didn't need the money. What was it about it that was good for him?
That's one of the most baffling questions. I mean, there are two questions that still sort of haunt me. One was, we had this giant wedding plan, which was weeks away, and people had already booked tickets and booked hotels, and I'm the one that pulled the plug on the wedding. But if I hadn't, it's like, how far was he going to take this? I mean, was everybody going to show up in Italy, and then what?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that one. And the other question is why. it wasn't about money for him. I mean, I ended up losing some money because I had put money into the wedding, blah, blah, that he was going to pay me back. But he was very, very generous, not only with me, but with my friends and family. So I think it's something to do with the thrill of the con, and somehow you're doing something for them. If it's not money, they're using you. They're always using you. So it's about
ego is huge. Look at this beautiful reporter he had on his arm, you know?
Well, thank you. But it's also about prestige. Maybe he thought because of what I do for a living that I was going to be able to help me. I mean, behind the scenes, he was starting to get into a lot of trouble scientifically for scientific misconduct. And I was already helping.
Did your story trip that off, or was someone looking into him before?
Partially. When I went public, when my story first went public, there was an incredibly well done documentary in Sweden that came out almost exactly the same time, that they had been digging into the medical part of him for a long time, and so the two things coincided, and then it became sort of a dual thing. I found things out, they exposed things, and it was a combination of. But I think maybe he thought I could help him, in some way. I was helping him write things behind the scenes as anyone would help a partner, So I don't know.
The story that you guys did at NBC, was that a very positive thing? That didn't identify any of the negatives.
No, but that was also before, it was finished before he and I really got involved, and it didn't air for about 6 months to a year later. I can't remember now. But at the time, none of this negative stuff had come out. I mean, we would find out later that when the documentary that we did about him aired, there were investigations underway already at Karolinska in Sweden, which is where they give the Nobel Prize in Medicine. But none of that was public yet. So, yeah, it was very positive. I mean, he had done this groundbreaking surgery on this beautiful toddler Korean toddler that had her surgery in Illinois, which still breaks my heart to think about her, who ended up dying. Just the whole thing's so tragic. What I went through is nothing compared to what the patients of these families have gone through.
Right. Well, again, I just thank you so much for speaking up, because it really is helping out a lot of women, and it's brought you into a group of women that have had shared experiences with other men. I saw a couple of things you've done. How did those women contact you, and what did they say when you first started talking to them?
When I first went public, as I'm sure is the case with you, women just started reaching out to me in droves. They found saying thank you for speaking up. Something similar has happened to me, or I know someone who's been through something similar, and I can't speak up, or I'm too afraid to speak up. And then there are other women that reached out that had been desperately trying to stop someone or get attention to to a man that was doing this in a serial manner. I had a lot of those, and so I did a documentary for Oxygen called Seduced by Evil about a man that he was meeting people online and basically bleeding them dry, just taking all their money and then jumping to the next woman. And he'd been doing it for years and years, and he is now in prison, thank goodness. But I did a documentary about all of them and how they all got together to try and get him behind bars. And there are just so many, unfortunately, of these stories. I think that's the thing that's been most shocking to me, is how common this is.
How was your experience with law enforcement when you were working on that on the last thing with the men in prison?
I think this is one of the biggest problems, and I don't know the answer to this, but over and over again, you hear the same thing. Women go to the police, and they report it, and they're either dismissed or, quite frankly, laughed at, and they're just told, that's not important. It's a romance scam, and it goes to the bottom of the pile. They're not taken seriously, and that's a problem. And women are working very hard to try and do something about that, but it takes a lot of tenacity. Women have to, keep banging on the door and beating the door down and going back, and it shouldn't be that hard.
Well, we can't do it by ourselves, but together we're going to change it.
Exactly.
That's something that's so important, and I've been working with SCARS, which is the Society for Citizens Against Relationship scams down in Miami, and I know that they are very interested in working with law enforcement to try to come up with an advocacy program. It's almost, for me, it's like domestic abuse was years ago when a woman would walk in and she'd be beaten up and the cops would say, go home and be nicer to your husband. Now you walk in and the guy gets arrested. So at some point, someone's going to look at this, and I think down here, I'm in South Florida, elderly abuse is huge, and they take that very, very seriously. And many of the women that are being taken online and in person here are considered, quote-unquote, elderly. Any of us over 60 now that can go to the grocery store for his senior hours are considered elderly, and I think it's something that's got to really be on the forefront. But, again, if women aren't speaking up, they're never going to know how pervasive the problem is. Right.
And there are some, you do get the few people in law enforcement that obviously that are taking this very seriously. That was the case in the story that I did about Derek Aldred for Oxygen. I mean, there was, a few investigators that were just so upset by it, and they really took it upon themselves to do something about it. And we need more people like that.
I think if people would understand that these kind of con games and scams can happen to their sister or their mother, their best friend, that they might take it a little more seriously than just saying, that woman out in the middle of nowhere, she...
Exactly.
Yeah. When they see women like you and me and those of us that are around the world that have had this happen, that we're real people, that we have families, that we were in it was like the perfect storm. You're in a situation where I think you said earlier today that it's not a crime to want love.
Exactly. I mean, I always say that, at the base of this, take everything else away, and people can snicker and say, oh, how could you be so stupid, or that would never happen to me. At the heart of this is a really simple thing, which is everybody wants to be loved, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's human nature. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved and believing somebody loves you back when they tell you that. That's not a crime. Wanting to be loved and being in love is not a crime, and there's nothing wrong with that, and I think it's really important to remember that. And then the second thing is that the thing to be really aware of is these men target women that in one way or another are vulnerable, and they have what I like to call a vulnerability radar. They know exactly who they can go after, and it could be anything. You could be coming out of a bad relationship or a divorce. You could have just lost your job, or you lost a family member. Anything that makes you a little bit more vulnerable or needy than usual, somehow they kind of sense this, and when you're like that, you have to be hyper vigilant about protecting yourself, because that's often when these con artists, target you and jump.
So in this world right now of social distancing, and we're not seeing people in person, how do you feel this is going to affect, people that are on the internet and looking for love on the internet?
I think people have to be even more careful, because obviously more people are going to go online, and these criminals are going to realize that, and so that's when it becomes really important to do the things that you can do to protect yourself, which are simple in a way but important, and we just don't do them. I always tell women, you have to do a background check. A lot of times women don't want to do that because they think, I'm snooping. No, you're not. You're protecting yourself. And you can do a very basic, simple background check pretty easily. There are lots of places that will online, like truthfinder.com, that you pay a small fee, and you can do at least a basic background check. So I recommend doing that. And then with pictures, and this is a huge thing with online scam artists, a lot of times they post pictures that are not of them, that they've stolen from somewhere else. And there are tools online you can also use that are very simple, reverse imaging tools, where you can take a photo and put it into Google's reverse imaging, and it will tell you where the photo came from. And so a lot of times you can very quickly see that, this is a photo from 10 years ago, and this is not the same person. So that's a simple thing to do. And then you have to ask a lot of questions and kind of take notes. If you start asking questions and paying attention to little details, they will contradict themselves because they try to hide the personal details of their lives. So you have to ask them as many questions as they're asking you, and ask them to send you more photos and more videos than what they've got on their online sites. And those things usually somewhere in there you'll probably figure out that something's wrong.
Yeah, it was interesting because in the 2 years of my relationship, I actually kept an online journal, so I have 4,000 pages of writing between him and me, which turned into, instead of family history, it basically turned into evidence, which we couldn't use for anything. But I was on a show once with a young woman. She was in her 20s, and the guy that conned her basically was a social experimentation, a social engineering experiment. He used videos from Instagram. So his profile was actually a real man from California, and he used his Instagram videos, which was
very
so
common.
Real. These guys are incredible.
Yep.
The
and it's not
that
hard for them to do, unfortunately, and that's the thing, and that's why we have to be vigilant. The inclination is just to trust, and again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can't, unfortunately.
But and trust is a hard thing, and it's a hard thing to get back.
Very, very, very hard.
But I feel that what we need to do is identify what's going on here, educate, help people to be aware and be cautious, but then to give them hope. I have remarried, so that's the happy part of my story.
Lovely.
Is that I had to open up, and I did it really quickly after the scam, and I'm not sure how I did that. I think I just felt like I didn't want the scammer to get the best of me, even though he got my money, but he didn't get my heart. And sometimes you have to you're going to get hurt in loving. And to open up
always, right? Whether you
to open up again is really challenging. It's you're again vulnerable, and how do you trust somebody again?
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think I felt the same way you do, that I didn't want to become bitter, and I didn't want this to change me. I'm a hopeless romantic, always have been, always will be, and I felt. It sounds like you felt the same way. I felt that if I allowed this situation to change that, or to change me, or to make me bitter, then that was letting him sort of win. That was giving him even more than he deserved or didn't deserve, however you want to phrase it. And it was really important to me not to change myself. And I think that comes from really being kind to yourself, is something I tell women all the time. And being kind to yourself means really taking in and acknowledging and understanding that this is not your fault, that this is 100% them, and that you, whatever reason, whatever was going on in your life, maybe you're a little bit vulnerable, or maybe you just were really wanting to be in a serious relationship at the time, or really wanting to be loved, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And so don't beat yourself up. You have to really be kind to yourself and know that it's not your fault, and above and beyond all, you're not stupid. And yes, it's going to feel painful, and yes, it's going to feel humiliating. That's okay. You can live with that. And not everybody is like this, and chances are if it happens to you once, it's not going to happen again. And so go slowly, but be open to love, and just be a little more aware, and you'll be just fine.
And because yours was so public, I found a lot of women are afraid to speak up and tell their families or their close friends because of what they're going to say to them. And I think that's the key to healing initially, is to get it out.
Yeah.
Don't hold it in anymore.
You have to lean on your friends. It's vital. I don't think I would not have gotten through my situation without my friends and my family. And you pretty quickly will realize, who your real friends are, quite honestly.
Yeah, exactly.
And the rest of them, forget them. Then they weren't really your friends in the first place. If they turn their backs on you when something like this happens, then they didn't have your back in the first place. And the people that are there, lean on them, because you will need them, because it'll be a rocky road, and there will be days that are incredibly difficult, and your emotions are going to ricochet all over the place, and your friends and your family and the people that truly have your back and truly love you will be there and will love you no matter what, and lean on them. Absolutely.
So I thank you so much. We do have someone that's come on. I see a bunch of people that are here. Does anybody have any questions for Benita today? Come on. I've unmuted everybody if you'd like to ask a question. If not, Benita and I have a lot to talk about. But how about it? Any
Hi,
questions?
Benita. This is Dr. Tim from SCARS. How are you today?
Hi, Tim. Good. How are you?
Pleasure meeting you. I was listening to your story, and that's one of the things that so many online scam victims forget, is that in reality, while the medium is new, the type of scamming is not particularly new. These kinds of confidence games have been going on since pre-Roman times. Anytime there was a guy who was too full of himself and too narcissistic to care, they were out there scamming somebody.
Right.
When you were reporting on this particular story, were you at all concerned about the potential liability associated with some of the defamatory things that you were saying about this person? Did that hinder or hold you back in terms of what you were reporting or saying?
It was something I thought about. I think in my case, because he was so world-renowned and so prestigious, and also was in trouble in a lot of avenues in his life, medically and scientifically, not really. And also, I knew, unequivocally that everything I was saying was true. Like Debby, who had kept all these notes, I had done the same thing. I had meticulous notes and video and pictures and all of that. And, most of these guys, I had people that said to me, my own family even, that was concerned, very concerned about me going public and worried that because these people are unpredictable, they were worried for my safety, quite frankly.
Exactly.
And I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't, and I did talk to a number of professionals, investigators, and private investigators about this, is because these guys usually are chickens, quite frankly. They have these big egos, and they kind of get away with whatever they can get away with, and often they keep getting away with it, which is why they keep doing it. But they're not the type, once they're done with you and once you expose them, they run. And they are not the types that go into court because they don't want to go into discovery, trust me. They don't want all this stuff pulled up, and they're not interested in it. So I felt that the risk was low, and I've never heard from him. So,
but he's still a surgeon in Russia or somewhere right now, isn't he?
Well, he still has his medical license, as far as I can tell. Okay. And the way it works in Europe is if you have a valid medical license, you can work in whichever country will take you. Obviously, his career has taken a gigantic hit. Nobody's really sure where he is or what he's doing.
Yeah. I saw somewhere he said that, as his last interview said that he was a freelance surgeon.
Right.
Whatever that meant.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, dear.
I feel sorry for anyone that he does surgery on. But
Right. Well, thank you so much, Benita, for your story. And how can people get a hold of you or reach out if this has happened to them?
So I am on Instagram and on Facebook. My Instagram is @lovekund, love, and then CONNED, and then Facebook, Love Kund Stories with Benita Alexander. So I'm pretty easy to find. Just Google me. I also have a website, benitaalexander.com. So any of those places you can send me a message.
I encourage women to do that. And if you hear of a friend that maybe has gone through this, please share, because we're not in this alone, and it's really important that we are there for the women that are beside us that may be going through the same thing, that are feeling scared and vulnerable and afraid to speak up. And so we're the voices, and I honor you for doing that, my dear.
Well, and likewise, you same with you. And I think it's very important that we put a real face on this. And there are good reasons some women cannot come forward, but I also want all those women to know that they're not alone, and I hope nobody who listens to this feels alone, because there are a lot of us out there, and we're all smart, intelligent women, and none of us thought this would happen to us. And if it did, it's okay. You can pick yourself up, you can keep going, and there is this, I find some solace in knowing that you aren't alone, and that there are a lot of people out there that understand.
Well, and for us, it's become a new passion. So
yes.
Out of your pain can become your passion.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important. So and
there is recovery, and there is joy on the other side, and you do learn from it, and you do get stronger.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the other part of our show is today, this is kind of new that we're doing. We're going to be doing What's New in the World of Scams, and I'd like everybody to be introduced to Dr. Tim McGinnis. Tim is the founder of SCARS, which is the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams. And Tim, what is new in the world of scams this week?
Well, this week we published a new article on our romancescamsnow.com website dealing with something that is very topical, specifically something called coronavirus grandparent scams. Scammers in India, Africa, and Asia have long exploited the love that grandparents and family members have for their grandchildren, but now they are turning that into money through crisis emergency scams. A typical grandparent scam involves someone calling, emailing, texting, or messaging an elderly person claiming that they are a relative, a grandson, or a niece or a nephew, and are in an emergency. All they need is some money, and it will all be fine. Unfortunately, it works because grandparents care deeply about their family members and are usually not so connected with the grandchild or niece or nephew so that they're able to precisely recognize their voice or their writing in a message. So the scammer basically pretends that they are that person, that grandchild, in an emergency. They're in the hospital and they need money, or they can't be admitted. Or the typical grandparent scam is that they've been arrested and they need bail, and they need the grandparent to go on to westernunion.com and wire money to them. Of course, it never goes to a legitimate destination. It only goes into the hands of scammers. But the reality is today we are flooded with a deluge of new scams specifically orienting around the coronavirus crises. In the last 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, victims have lost more than £10 million directly attributable to coronavirus scams. So they are everywhere. If anyone gets a call from someone pretending to be a family member, claiming to be in an emergency or crisis, there are certain things that you must do. You must resist the urge to act immediately. You must verify the caller's identity. Ask them questions to prove who they are. Call a family member to get confirmation that something like this has happened. Check their story out with someone else in your family that you trust. And by all means, do not send cash, gift cards, or money transfers. Talk to a family member and work it out as a family. Don't do it individually, even if you're asked to keep it secret and away from other family members for any reason.
Well, that's really tough, Tim. Our elderly population gets scared when the scammers are saying, "Don't tell so and so," don't tell your mother or my mother that I'm doing this. That shuts them down. So,
exactly.
How do we get the word out?
Well, I would encourage anyone to go to our website, romancescamsnow.com, and learn about the reality of scams. You'll find thousands of professionally created articles touching on every topic, from the mechanics of how scams work to the psychology of scams, specific warnings, covering every conceivable topic associated with online, phone, email, and any other form of what's known as a cyber-enabled scam.
Do you work with law enforcement, and how so?
We do. We're directly partnered with the United States Department of Homeland Security. As a matter of fact, Debbie, you have been on some of the conference calls that we share with them on a monthly basis. We're an affiliate of Europol and the Council of Europe. We have direct connections with law enforcement around the world. One of our SCARS chapters in Indonesia. The leader of that particular group is actually a senior officer of the Indonesian cyber crimes police. We're connected with them in everywhere from Philippines to Latin America. And almost daily I speak with the acting director of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission in Nigeria. Of course, most of these entities are in some state of shutdown right now as a result of the crisis.
Has the crisis shut down the scammers, other than the grandparent thing here? Or how are romance scams going this week?
Well, actually, romance scams are in decline, but only because the scammers have started to apply their skills in addressing the coronavirus opportunities that exist. So that has literally exploded. So they backed off on business email compromise scams since so many businesses are in shutdown and shifted their attention. But scammers are not shut down. They were already hiding in their homes to begin with. So it's not like they were out and about much to begin with.
And how has I know my IT guy is in India right now, and some of these scammers coming out of India were in call centers. Have those been affected too then?
Exactly. They're extraordinarily large scamming organizations based in India and elsewhere in the third world especially that are occupying previously defunct call centers. In those particular cases, yes, those organizations have been shut down, so those scammers are offline, no longer connected because their connection to the Internet and phones was through those physical facilities. But as soon as things open back up, they'll be back on with a vengeance.
Well, there are good things to being shut down. So, Tim, any other tips for how to survive this coronavirus and stay safe from scammers?
Well, obviously, our individual psychology and mental health is critically important. I'm not a medical doctor nor a healthcare professional. I'm actually an anthropologist. But the reality is that there are a number of organizations, and we note them on our various social media pages, etc., where individuals can literally get counseling sessions online for free through chat sessions, etc., around the country. And if necessary, you can call your county public health department and ask them for counseling services that are still available during the coronavirus crises. It's important that you not lose connection with real people. Make sure that you're talking daily with your family members and your friends. Don't let yourself become isolated, because in isolation, you become vulnerable to the stories that scammers weave. Literally, the smartest people in the world can fall for scams. The three people that are on this call are all brilliant people, yet the reality is scamming works against anyone. And the more intelligent you are, actually the more susceptible you are, because you believe to a greater extent in your own infallibility. So never hesitate to stay connected with real people. Use real people as sounding boards and as people who can help guide you when you have questions about something that you see online. Right now, so many people are panicked because of the silly things that they're hearing in the news media, whether it's a stupid statement made by the WHO that they're going to drag people out of their homes, or the things that are being said to embarrass our government. But the reality is, all you need to do is to talk it through with family and friends, and it has a tremendously calming effect, which can help all of us endure this isolation and this quarantine that we all find ourselves in.
Well, I find it's a really interesting time not being able to connect in person with family and friends. But the other day, we actually scheduled a Zoom conference between my brothers and my mother and dad and I, and my grandkids, and it was so much fun. It brought a different element to our relationship because people were really craving that family relationship. And you know, my mother and dad were technically challenged, and so I pulled up my phone and did a FaceTime and showed it aimed it at my computer screen so that they could kind of connect in a funny kind of way. But it really did satisfy that urge to see that everybody was safe. And those are real people. Benita, have you had experience? You're up in New York City right now, and in a city that's closed down. What are you doing to stay connected?
Same thing. We actually did a Zoom very similar with my family last weekend, and I've done the same thing with friends. And I mean, I have a teenage daughter, and that's how she's staying connected. And I think that's very important. And I think Tim makes a very important point. It's when we isolate and sort of go inward and don't talk to people as we're starting to have fears and doubts, that's when we really get in trouble. And, it's really important to have somebody that even confidentially you can say, hey, like I really like this person, or I'm talking to this person online, but, what do you think? Or ask somebody else to do some checking for you.
I call that the dating buddy. I think we need a dating buddy.
Yeah.
It's called having a wingman.
Well, it is, because our heart rules our head. I think so.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So you need a voice of reason on the side, somebody whose heartstrings are not all tangled up in it.
That's
hey, Debbie,
tough.
on your next program next week, I would recommend that you start your show with a security guide to Zoom because, as you all know, hackers have been running rampant in the Zoom platform and busting into calls, business, family, students online, and creating total havoc by displaying porn and all kinds of inappropriate content. But there are a few simple modifications that you can make in your Zoom settings to make sure that your call is secure.
We'll put that on next week because my lawyer was doing a Zoom call with 100 international lawyers, and it got hacked by a porn guy. So they were mortified.
My daughter's in school, too.
That's awful. With all of our kids on online school right now, it's a huge issue.
It really is,
Well, Tim, I'll work with you on that. Thank you so much. So, Benita, one last thing. I mean, what would you want to say to women out there and how, if they have a story that they want to tell either you or me, how would they get a hold of you to do that? Because I'm actually on your website, which is a lovely website. And there was, can they email you at my story at
They can, You can email me
now?
directly through my website. You can send me a message on my Instagram or my Facebook, and I will get right back to you. And sometimes women contact me and they're very unsure. They're very unsure if they want to talk or if their story is worth telling. But I encourage you to reach out anyway. To you or to me, I mean, we may just have some insight or be able to help you. Reaching out to me doesn't mean that you have to tell your story publicly. It's just connecting with someone that understands. And I think it's just helpful. I mean, I think most women who reach out, and it's confidential. I think I would stress that above and beyond everything. I mean, reaching out to me doesn't mean that I'm going to be standing somewhere with a microphone telling your story. It's 100% confidential, and it's just someone to talk to and somebody that understands. And then if somebody is interested in telling their story, then we can explore that and explore avenues to do that. I have a show coming up that's been put on hold because of the whole coronavirus situation, which hasn't been announced yet, but where I will be telling these stories on a national TV show. So I'm looking for stories that people that want to expose people and tell their stories. So by all means, contact me.
Well, what I want people to understand, too, is that you'll know in your gut if there's something that's going on in your relationship that's not really there. Listen to it, because I didn't, and I think I might have, but I had no reason to not trust my guy. At least I didn't think I had any reason to not trust him. All I'd heard about years ago was that online dating was safe, and this is a great way to do it. And for me, it was safe because he was overseas, and I wasn't ready for a physical relationship. But little did I know he was going to, bleed me dry financially, and that's so against my character. But I had fallen for him, hook, line, and sinker, and I had separated myself from my family and friends because that's what he wanted me to do. And so that's where we need that buddy. We need a voice of reason behind us saying, "Whoa, slow down." But I think for you and I, Benita, no matter what people might have said to us, wouldn't have changed my mind. Because I feel like you feel that this happened for a reason, and maybe because we've got the voice to stand up and speak up. But I don't want anybody else to have to go through it.
Oh, me either. I really don't. If I can prevent somebody else from having to go through what I went through, then I've done my job, That is something. You brought up an important point, though, which is similar in any kind of abusive relationship, actually. When somebody tries to isolate you from people that they perceive as a threat, that's also a huge warning sign. And I can think back to a couple of people that my guy didn't like for one reason or another, friends of mine, and he would start saying things about them, like, oh, I don't like that person, or, whatever. So, and I think he probably was sensing that maybe they were going to catch on to him, or maybe they were going to find something out, and they do that. They try to push you away from anyone that they perceive as a threat. So that's always something to look out for as well.
That was the Deborah Newell story.
Right.
And he was pushing her daughters away, and he ended up ultimately being killed by a daughter. But that was a huge part of that program where he didn't like somebody and he kept them out of her life.
Right, so, which mirrors abusive relationships. So it's a huge warning sign.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, again, thank you so much, Benita. And everybody, reach out to Benita, or you can contact me at Debby, which is Debby, at thewomanbehindthesmile.com. You can reach Dr. Tim at SCARS, the Society for Citizens Against Relationship Scams, at romancescamsnow.com. Incredible website with I love this word today. The word of the day is plethora. A plethora of information, anything you'd want to know about scam victims, support groups, and that kind of thing. And again, this week in the news, the grandparent scam where they're going after you for the coronavirus scare. So we thank you all for being with us today. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Benita. I really appreciate it. I know we're going to do things in the future together. We are the voice for the victims, which are not victims because they're going to be survivors. We can be awesome, not angry. We can be victors and not victims. So let's stand up, everybody, and become aware of what's going on out there. Be careful, be cautious, and know that you're loved from afar. By us.
Thanks so
All
much
right,
for
dear.
having
Thanks
me.
so much. Thanks, Tim, for being with us. Thanks to our guests, our other viewers who have been with us. We appreciate it, and we hope you can come back next week. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.
You got it. Take care, honey.
Bye.